So today I'm with Matthew Milne, who works for Bridge Financials, which are based up in, correct me if I'm wrong, is it Aberdeen or are you Edinburgh? Which one?
We are based in Edinburgh. Yeah, we originally both met working for another firm in Aberdeen, but we're both now based in Edinburgh.
Yeah, so Matthew's actually working what we could call in practice for an accountancy firm. And the first thing I'm going to ask you actually is I looked at your LinkedIn profile this morning, and I think it is a touch of the old Rachel Reeves here. Is that right? You've got 2 master's degrees?
I don't have two. I initially read psychology for my undergrad, so I had a fairly long and winding road into accounts. So I studied psychology as an undergrad. I ended up quite specialising in quite a niche area of psychology that meant if I wanted to pursue that, I would have probably needed to stay in and around the university campus, do a lot of research.
Academia.
Yeah, I didn't really fancy that, or I didn't see there being a lot of longevity in that, and I knew at some point I would have needed to retrain. So I just decided to do it as soon as possible. And then I returned to university for another year. I just did a year in accounts and finance. That was my door into working in practice.
What prompted that then from psychology? Because that's quite a change, isn't it?
Yeah, so I initially read psychology, came from a family of psychologists and social workers, so I think I was just following in the footsteps initially. And in accounts and finance, it was quite a pragmatic shift, actually. It was quite a lot of employment opportunities at the time. It was not something I had kind of any experience in, and I thought, well, might as well just take the plunge. So it was a fairly pragmatic move, employment at the core of it really at that point in time. And yeah, that was me. So I went back to uni. I came out the other side of uni, not really even aware that there were specific intakes for accounting practice. So obviously I missed that entirely. And I was really lucky to find a firm in Aberdeen that basically took me on as a trainee. And then I joined the actual training intake the next year.
Yeah. So what was it about kind of, when you start, you worked at AAB, which we know quite well. What was it about that kind of role that you obviously, enjoyed or took to? I know obviously subsequently you've gone on to kind of take a keen interest in software, but talk us through those early days, what it was like.
Yeah, so I think initially the role I had when I was training was in audit. So it was quite systems and methodical approach. So it kind of transferred fairly well from what I was doing in psychology. The area of psychology I was reading in was quite scientific and quite process-based. So I think it fit quite a lot of the skills I had. I knew that of the traditional routes that you get into accounting, it's things like audit and tax. Audit was definitely the preferable choice for me and the way I like to work and the types of skills I had to bring to that team. So I trained in audit I think I stayed in audit just a little bit after my training. I would actually been on secondment with one of our clients for about a year, 2 stints of 6 months. That was around the time that Hilary was joining. So her role was to set up our internal cloud, policy and trying to find how a cloud service line might work in a larger practice. So because I was coming back from secondment at that point in time, after such a long period of time out, I just naturally transitioned over into her team at that time. And then we both worked on developing our cloud solution. And that's where we kind of moved into quite a lot of the software focus from there.
Yeah, for those people who are watching this or listening to this, Hilary Dyson, which Matthew now works with at Bridge Financials. And in terms of, I guess we'll come on to Bridge and, who you like working with in a moment. But I think one of the things, the observations that, has got to be discussed really is in Scotland, so much of the economy was oil and gas. And from our own experience, we've got a number of customers who are in renewables. And I think you've experienced this as well, haven't you? Talk us through how the economy is changing up there and where you see it kind of going in the next few years.
Yeah, so I think we saw it very closely, obviously, around the time that we were both working up in Aberdeen. Quite a lot of the clients that we had exposure with, and also the client that I was working with on secondment for just about a year, they were in the oil and gas sector as well. And obviously the city kind of ebbs and flows with how well that is doing.
Yeah.
I think there's quite a lot of really exciting things happening in the renewable space now. And as you said, we've worked in the past with, I believe they actually are on Zahara as well. And we've worked with some people who are in the renewable space up in Aberdeen. And there's a lot of really exciting things happening there, quite a big think tank pulling together some really exciting ideas for kind of skills improvement, information sharing. So I think there is a bounce back in the oil and gas space for sure, but I think there's a lot, certainly up north in the northeast, there's a lot of really exciting things happening in the renewable space now.
And do you feel that, because we hear about the kind of the green economy and green jobs, but will they replace the oil and gas jobs? That's the question, isn't it? Hopefully we see as one, industry is, declines. Does it need to decline? That's a whole new conversation. Another one should be taking over. But it's what's the kind of, unemployment situation or the employment situation like up in the north in those industries?
So I think it's very good. So I think the most obvious thing that happened around the time of, I guess, as the oil kind of did start to have a little bit of a decline was people were starting to leave Aberdeen specifically. Obviously, that's a very oil-driven city. And I think, I'm not sure if it's exactly the same people all coming back to the city now, but there's certainly a big uptick in people working in that space. I was reading something, I think, just a few weeks ago where there's been about a 40 to 50% uptake in the renewables jobs in the past kind of 8 or so years. So there's a lot of movement of people going on again, which is really good, and really good to see Aberdeen doing well again.
Yeah, and when we're talking about renewables, are we talking about offshore wind? Is that predominantly what I'm not sure solar is. Did you see the report recently that the UK is uniquely placed to be the second worst country in the world for solar energy, second only to Ireland? So I'm guessing it's kind of, wind, offshore wind, is it, that we're talking about?
Yeah, wind, and I think quite a lot of hydro energy going on as well. I believe there's a kind of hydro station opened up just a few weeks ago, actually, in Perthshire as well. So yeah, wind and water, I think, are the predominant areas.
Yeah, I mean, if we can get water to work, being an island nation surrounded by it, that would be an obvious one, wouldn't it, really?
Yeah, well, you would hope so. So yeah, I think, there's quite a lot going on, and I think about biorenewables and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, that's good. So in terms of Bridge Financials, you and Hilary started that, what, kind of 2-3 years ago now, is it? Something like that, or a little bit longer?
It's actually going to be 5 years in May.
Oh, no way.
So we were right at the 101, how not to open a business. It was right at the start of lockdown.
Yeah.
So yeah, 5 years later this year.
5 years. And in terms of the kind of, we've worked together on some projects, some quite complicated things. I can think of one particular client. But what's your kind of, what I would, in marketing speak, called an ICP, an ideal customer profile? Who are you particularly good with? What kind of customers?
Yeah, so I think one of the ideas that we always had when kind of trying to define what our service line was going to look like was that irrespective of what sector you're in, yes, you might be framed with, I guess, a regulatory or compliance structure, but if you're going to have an issue with things like your purchase order approvals and maybe your finance reporting, those things are going to manifest broadly the same way.
Yep.
So what we tried to do from there was basically we decided, well, let's get really good at things like purchase order approvals. Let's get really good at resolving issues like finance reporting. And I guess we've kind of proved that is the actual fact. So we've worked with a load of different types of clients in the SaaS space, food production, food manufacturing, the oil and gas space. So we've worked with a really wide variety of type of client. And yeah, we maybe are not industry leading in terms of their regulatory or compliance framework, but we kind of look at our projects as resolving the problems rather than kind of trying to find a very specific niche of client type.
Is there a certain size of business that you particularly appeal to? For our own kind of experience, Zahara as an application, it only really comes to life if you're either processing an awful lot of invoices volume, or you've now reached a certain size with a certain amount of staff. You need to control costs. So where we always kind of think 50 to 200 employees is a perfect sweet spot for us. But what's your kind of ideal size of client? in case anyone's out there in the market for a accountancy firm.
Support.
The two very switched on people.
Yeah, so again, I think we work with a lot. You know, our client base has evolved over years as the business and the service line has matured. So now we're working with kind of larger entities that are maybe kind of 50 staff plus, you know, a higher level of turnover that comes with that. But, you know, we still work with kind of sole traders as well. You know, we'll still set people up on a finance platform if they need it just for themselves. And we also work with quite small teams as well. What we do tend to find is that we do quite a lot of work locally in for example, the charity space. So their systems and processes can be really complex, even though they've maybe got 10 to 15 employees. Whereas we can work with teams with 50 to 100 employees, and it can actually be a comparative, really easy project for us to undertake.
And what's the mood music like at the moment with your clients? I inadvertently ended up in there's a cricket club just across the road from where I live, and I went over there for a drink on Friday. I think it's Friday night actually, and it turned out to be the annual general meeting. So we ended up sitting there for, oh gosh, we better sit through the chairman's statement. And that actually, I was so surprised at how brutal the cost increases had affected them. I'd never really thought about, you know, a club like that had been going for 125 years or something crazy. But yeah, it's just, but you know, even in a club, you know, like that, they'd experience all manner of cost increases. Charities, it feels like it's a massive oversight, you know, this national insurance increase that's coming because you know, they just don't have the bandwidth to suddenly spend all, you know, this extra money. So everyone we talk to at the moment is, you know, so conscious of cost control, which is Zahara is a big part of that, making sure that, you know, we do our bit. But yeah, what are you hearing from your clients?
I think we're seeing almost exactly the same. So the NI thing, again, may be quite nice in thought. I don't know if it's manifesting exactly the way it was intended to, obviously. I think more recently with our people or our clients in the charity sector, the kind of delay, certainly locally, with funding announcements and so on, that's making a lot of people fairly agitated as well. Thankfully, that's now all resolved. Yeah, not even specific to the charity space or the public sector space, but private businesses as well, really feeling a lot of the pressure. And as you say, it's a piece of work that we undertake on almost all of our projects now is around spend management, budget reviews versus actuals, report building, delivering real-time information. I think it's something that every business is feeling the heat of at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know of any businesses these days, certainly not in the UK, which, you know, are making money for fun. I think, you know, I really feel for anyone who's, you know, involved in hospitality because they've almost got like a three-way hit of increased NI, they've got national minimum wage increases, and I think business rates relief. You know, when you start to see, you know, restaurants and pubs now opening about 3 days a week, you know, it used to be that they're going to be shut on a Monday and then they're shut on a Tuesday. You know, it's a tough old economy out there, isn't it? And I think you have to scrutinize your costs. You have to look at, you know, do we need this? You know, can we get it cheaper elsewhere? I mean, you know, obviously that's a lot of where Zahara comes into it for, you know, that cost control comes through scrutiny. But yeah, I've not really experienced this sense of nervousness in many, many years. You know, I'm old. I can remember, you know, the recessions of the early 90s and things like that. But that was a different type of scary. This is unknown, I think, to a lot of people.
I think it's not discriminatory either, is it? I think it's everybody is feeling this at the moment. And I think everybody's concerned about how, you know, the forecasts are looking. I think it's tougher now to get through things like an audit review of how your business is going to look for 12 months and, you know, a significant burden on preparing forecasts and different types of forecasts to see how you're going to be able to weather, you know, different scenarios about whether your business is going to do well or not, or in the charity sector, whether funding is going to land or whether it isn't going to land. And your heart does go out to quite a lot of these clients. You're working with people who are making fairly unpopular and decisions they're definitely not wanting to make, certainly around personnel and such.
Yeah. The last podcast I did with Peterborough United, and he explained to me there that the NI increase was going to cost an extra 250,000 a year. I mean, they've got football players in Division 1, which, it won't be, their salaries are not going to be small, but it's kind of like, well, 250 grand a year extra, off the bottom line, if there is a bottom line. And with very little capacity apart from increasing ticket prices. And I think that's the difficulty for a lot of businesses at the moment. It's like, well, how do we react to that? Do we just put our prices up, or, it's a competitive world. So if you are a commercial business rather than charity, you can't just put prices up without, the repercussions of losing existing customers or not gaining the new customers you want. So it is tough. And also we've got this kind of very strange, well, not very strange, but to a certain extent, exciting opportunity with AI. But AI is, potentially coming for your job. Certainly, there's certain industries, where we are in development, marketing, where AI can add a massive value. And I know you're big into the software and the software tech space of Bridge Financials. What have you been playing with recently, software wise, which has interested you? I think that's a conversation for us to explore.
Yeah, so it's something we've actually undertaken a project, I guess, with ourselves as the client fairly recently. And we had a third member of the team join us in about October last year. So just as part of that process, so we went from a team of 2 to a team of 3, and quite naturally we needed to then just divulge all the information out of our heads so that someone else can work with that. So as part of that, we basically revamped all of the systems that we were using. From our point of view, I'm not sure if there's too many, I guess, of the actual processes we undertake on a day-to-day basis that are going to be replaced by AI entirely. So I think one of the things that we've really leaned into with that is, I guess, about collating and gathering, making accessible all of our information. So the way one of our project would work for us is we typically will talk to everyone in a client that we're working with who's a stakeholder to either one of the operational or financial processes. Historically, what we've had to do is Hilary and I would both sit on one of those calls. One of us would lead the discussion, so you can have a natural discussion with the client, and the other one would take notes, and then you'd have to transcribe the notes, and then you generate a report from the notes. So now the most significant gain we could possibly have ever had was we just have an AI note taker who sits in, listens to our calls. You can both contribute to a discussion, and it's significantly improved our quality of life for writing reports. So it's already summarized. We can lift bits and pieces from the summary.
It's the summary at the end is the valuable bit, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the other thing we're always mindful of as well is that even as a small team, if Hilary or I can't pick up a piece of work, the other one has to. So quite a lot of the tools that we work with now, and we've replaced our project management or kind of practice management tool fairly recently as well. And they've got the ability baked in there that you can just ask it, summarize for me the last 10 emails on this client. So if I needed to pick up something for Hilary or vice versa, we don't need to do that detailed, handover anymore. So,
I like the sound of that. That's
so basically it plugs into our Outlook, or rather Outlook feeds all of our emails there. So for each of our clients, we'll just set up a piece of work for every one of our projects, and you can then allocate an email that comes through into a project or a client or a piece of work, and then anybody can dip in and out of that and see where we're up to, what stage is the project at, how many of the tasks have been checked off, and so on. So I think from our point of view, we've made a significant step forward into hopefully this year, which will take us through scaling and adding a few more members of the team, hopefully soon.
Yeah, I mean, from my own experience, big kind of user of AI. I'm using it as a co-pilot when I've started coding now. After all these years, I always called myself a frustrated programmer, but I've actually managed to start properly coding now, and so that's good. But the summarizing is superb. So one of the challenges for us was at the end of the day, look at how many support tickets there's been in a day. And sometimes it's very small, and other times there's big spikes, and all you want to do is say, what was all that about? So I wrote a routine that just summarizes the the day's support tickets, and it sends out an email at 6 o'clock and just gives us a brief of what happened that day. And that to me is really, really valuable. And it's got better and better as well. I've made a few tweaks to it. But when I see things like Zapier, it's like, would you like to describe what you want to achieve? No, because it's just as easy for me to click what I want to do. So I think some people just went straight into, oh, look at this. You can now, talk and it would do stuff. I don't think that's the value of AI. I think it's got to save you time and, and just describing a problem rather than just clicking to fix a problem is not saving time. And I don't think we've really worked out yet in Zahara where it's going to slot in. But I think it's like, kind of being able to say, where do I buy, who do I buy stationery from might be useful in a school. So I think we've got a kind of roadmap. But really, for me, I'm looking at how do we rationalize our business so we get better information. And I think what you just described there about the kind of summarizing your last 10 emails, that will be really good with the clients. They summarize the last 10 support tickets so we can, sort of get, talk to this client and find out if we can get to the root cause of something. I think that's where it's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you finding it's something your clients or customers are engaging you and asking, what is your AI roadmap now?
Not yet, which is just as well, because we're busy building features that they do want. But it's I think it's on the roadmap. For us, it will be the kind of, probably in about a year's time. I'm not to say we won't be doing anything between now and then, but there's things that we're working on at the moment. We've got our kind of three-way matching or AI matching coming out soon. So here's your purchase order line items, here's your invoice line items, and actually matching them together using AI. So we're using that kind of stuff, and we will use it for statement reconciliation, which we're going to do by the end of the summer, which we haven't put into Zahara yet, but it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do. But then I think it's that kind of asking questions of your data is the beyond that, you know what I mean? So once we've got the core functionality, that highly polished core functionality, then I think it kind of being able to ask questions of your data, it will come next, particularly around spend analytics. I mean, you could say, where can I save money? And that's where it'd be really useful to scrutinize all your line items, I think, and sort of say, well, you've been spending this much with this customer and, supplier. And if you change that, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, how about you? Are you getting, I mean, AI can, save money. So are your customers coming to you saying, what can we do?
A little bit. Yeah. I think it's something we've always been kind of fairly mindful of, is how we present that to people. Even our arrival to carry out just a fairly basic project around looking at efficiencies on systems and projects, that can kind of raise the alarm a little bit. I think everybody's always fairly worried about what does efficiency actually mean.
Yeah.
Specific to me and my job, obviously. So it's something we've framed kind of fairly closely, and obviously with the way that we kind of, I guess, deliver our service to clients is we'll provide them with either improved processes or maybe a piece of software to help with that. So we kind of really rely on the actual end software vendors to have that in their solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to us, we don't develop software ourselves, so we don't, I guess, go out of our way to write or improve that. But things like Zapier, all of those things, we do work with clients on those.
Yeah.
I guess it's not necessarily AI, is it? But it's like the manual version of AI, isn't it?
Let's have a chat with you. You mentioned finance systems there, or the software. Let's have a chat about that. It struck me when I went to Accountex last May, wasn't it? That Sage were kind of back in the game. They were definitely giving out luxury rucksacks and all manner of swag like that. But you and Hilary were big fans of Xero. How are you finding that marketplace now? Because it feels to me like Sage have fought back. QuickBooks are still very much kind of there, advertising heavy with Frank Lampard and chucking some money at it. But where do you see that the kind of Sage Xero QuickBooks mix at the moment in that kind of expanding SME space, I guess you would call that?
Yeah, so I think looking at the base platforms, I think, as you mentioned, Sage have historically been a ways off in terms of the cloud. I think they were just a little slower to uptake, weren't they? So from our point of view, we just decided that we were going to focus on Xero, maybe as to deliver a stronger service for Xero. And do think in terms of the ecosystem around Zero, it probably is still the most robust. We've been working a little bit more so recently with I don't think they do a whole lot of writing of software and apps and integrations anymore, but they work in the space of the Zero API. And I think they heavily favour the Zero API, and I think it is, from everything that we've heard about it, it is the best API to write into as well.
Yeah.
Hiller and I have been doing this now for 7 years, and the app marketplace was fairly unwieldy even back then. I believe there's now something like 1,200, 1,300 apps
Amazing
on there, and how, we're quite lucky that we're kind of 7 years, across two businesses down our path here, how anybody else would get started in this space and try and work out, even for something fairly streamlined like reporting, for example, how do you work out, or how do you invest the time to work out what is going to be the best option for not necessarily your client portfolio, but for you yourself as a business. I don't envy anyone who's not as far down this journey as we are, because it takes a lot.
Absolutely. There's always that tendency you stick to what you know more than anything else, and that's why we've got customers who use Pegasus Opera, which has been around since I think green screen days, and and Sage 50, where they just won't let it go. So I think when it comes to finance systems, people are very reluctant. But the one system that is showing an awful lot of promise at the moment for us, and I guess potentially your customers as well, is Sage Intacct, where I guess there comes a point with Zero where you just need more analysis fields, or you just need something, the next level. And the next level is always perceived to be kind of, you've got Sage 200, but it's very clunky. You've got kind of, NetSuite, Oracle, and it gets very, very expensive very quickly. Sage Intacct is something we integrated with recently, and it's a very, very sophisticated system. It's truly cloud. It was built from cloud from scratch. So that's quite exciting. Do you get that kind of, do you get those questions as to where do we go from here when we need that next level?
We do encounter that quite a lot, actually. And what we've typically found maybe over the last 12 months or so is people will come to us maybe with an idea that they're thinking Intacct, they're thinking NetSuite. Could we maybe give them a use case for Zero as well? So they kind of self-scoped a couple of options and just want to find out a little bit more about Zero. To be honest, I think a lot of that's not necessarily helped by Zero's own marketing. They lean fairly heavily into this for small, medium businesses. And you'd naturally get to a point where you think, well, I'm no longer a medium business. But what we typically find is Zero plus some operational apps to support you with that. There's a lot of longevity in that, and you could get well into the large business space with that. So, for example, last year, at the tail end of the year, we supported a business who had realised they preemptively jumped to NetSuite and were looking to come back down to Zero. So we just re-migrated them back to Zero. And as you say, some of these platforms are staggeringly, frighteningly expensive.
Yeah. Not
just to implement, but to maintain every month. And you look at Zero, it's 40 quid a month or something. It's difficult to try and move away from.
Yeah. You mentioned their marketing there. It's quite curious, isn't it? Because it comes up on my feeds as like 90% discount. And I think, it's not everyone is what I, sort of endearingly call Fred in his shed. You know what I mean? There are businesses out there using Zero who like us with, certain size of business, and you can build your ecosystem around that. I know the 40 quid a month turned into 4,000 quid a month, I think, with Sage Intacct when my colleague Jonathan looked at it. And it's like, that's so much money in comparison. So yeah, you can afford to buy the apps. But I guess there just comes a point where if you're trying to streamline your business, it's, you just need more, effectively more than two tracking categories. But yeah, I think the simplicity of Zero and that kind of software is fantastic. And it just helps so many businesses, get out of their they don't need to be scared of their finance system like they used to be. So
I think you're totally right. It's the point that we kind of have to be fairly tactical with every time is Zero, two tracking categories. Everybody wants the third tracking category. You have to end up doing some kind of fairly creative stuff for the chart of accounts sometimes. or you leverage Zahara with its custom fields, for example, it is a limitation. I'm not sure it's been this long, or several years now, hasn't it, where they've had two tracking categories. I think that's
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
isn't it? It's not.
I'm not sure why you can't have unlimited. Really, you just add a field, and that's one of the things I'm always thinking about is when we're building new features. There's something I did the other day. So we've got our own internal kind of application that I wrote where we started kind of pulling together all of our customer data. It's effectively like an admin panel. But I just quickly put together a custom list of all the software we use. So it was just what they call a CRUD list, which is create, update, delete. Really, really simple. So I started listing out all the software we use. 10,400 quid a month on software in Zahara. Now, some of those are big cost of sales softwares, like that we run inside the app itself. But the long tail of these little applications, when you add them all up, and it's like it's when you bring a list together like that, you get, oh my God, that's part of the visual. And it's like, we should put that, we should make that list available inside Zahara, where it's like, okay, well, you could just have like a software estate list, or you could just have a custom fields list where you go, what do you want the list to be called? What fields do you want? So it's always try and build it with customization in mind. And that's why with Zero, why they've just stuck at two tracking categories where, you go to Business Central or Sage Intacct, I think you can have infinitesimal amounts, you know what I mean? Which is quite difficult for reporting. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially with the more recent work we've done in the charity space, two tracking categories is just not enough. And what is your options beyond duplication in the chart of accounts? Are you then going to have to extract the whole general ledger at the end of the year and do maybe more than one reanalysis for your 2 fields, 3 fields that don't fit into Zero?
Yeah. I mean, Legally Sage 50 has that kind of that charity add-on where you just add that extra kind of fund and things like that. Yeah. In terms of you and Hilary are very much what I would call a professional services led kind of accountancy firm. You're not there just to audit someone. You're there to add real value to the business, to get under the skin, look under the bonnet, and all that kind of stuff. Where do you think the future of the accountancy firm is going over the next 5 to 10 years? I'm guessing technology is going to be a big part of it.
I think so, yeah. And I know we touched on AI just a little bit earlier, and I think there's going to come a time, it's very doom and gloom in accounting. I don't think there's an industry that's quite as doom and gloom about the arrival of AI, but I think it's going to come a time where people who are leveraging this tech and AI in a practical way, they will leave behind in some way firms who are not able to get ahead of the game with that. I think more generally what we have seen kind of fairly recently is that more traditional practices, so we don't, I guess, sell traditional services, which would be things like bookkeeping, management, accounting. We try and avoid that type of work in favour of our project work. I'm not sure there's a big uptake for that, or larger practices are struggling to make a reasonable service line out of the type of work we are doing. So I think there's going to be maybe a branching off of kind of cloud-based systems and processes advisory, which is what we like to do. Yeah. And then I guess just a consolidation of more traditional accounting.
Yeah, I guess from a kind of business founder's point of view, it's having an accountant tell you what you've just done. It's fairly dull. Working on them and what you can achieve is far more exciting, isn't it? And that, I guess that's where you are. You're right there at the kind of, working with these clients, aren't you, on future plans, which is, I think, is exactly where you need to be.
I think so, yeah. So I think our main philosophy was always you shouldn't need an accountant to unlock your figures. If you have good processes and good systems, you should be self-sufficient to get your financial information. So one of the things that we really wanted was to work with our clients in a way where you don't need to give it to an accountant who does some kind of whatever, do it, repackages it nice and neatly and gives it back to you. And you couldn't possibly have ever gotten there by yourself without the accountant involved.
Yeah.
So our goal was always to kind of provide systems and processes that make self-sufficient finance information effectively.
Cool. Well, I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Actually, the insights we've kind of picked up on Bridge, and also the whole environment we're in at the moment in the tech space. It's really interesting. I know your passion for technologies. We've had conversations with you in the past, and you there got your kind of finger on the pulse of what the apps are doing and things like that. So thanks for sharing your insights. I found it really interesting.